Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Olivia, and we're so glad you're here today. Hello, sister. Have you listened to any good music lately?
Yes, actually. I was listening to a fascinating album last night.
What?
It's not where you were getting. I don't know what it's called.
Oh, that was helpful.
I can tell you the artist is. It's Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins. Thomas is a big Smashing Pumpkins fan. He did a solo album that's like bluegrass.
Oh, weird.
I actually think you'd really like it.
Okay.
And it's really good. And he listened to it while he was making dinner, and I came in and he does a very smart thing, which is that he just plays music in the house. And so he's not like, here, listen to this new music. Yeah. I don't want to be confronted with new music, but I actually knew the songs by the time I understood that I knew the songs. I think it's worth it. I'll get the name from him. But yes, so I did listen to that.
Do you,
yes.
Well, I have a question for you. Do you have music you listen to when you're feeling very depressed?
I listened to Happy Days Are Here Again by Barbra Streisand, and then the mashup of Happy Days Are Here Again. And there's another song that Judy Garland sings, and they sing it together, and it makes me cry every time. Is that what you're talking about? Like painful music?
Like if you're just feeling super low, like I know like I have certain musicians that I listen to just when I'm feeling really low.
Who do you listen to when you're feeling super low?
Van Morrison, always.
Okay. Because it lifts you up?
No, it doesn't lift me up. It just like makes me feel something.
Okay. Yeah. I listened to Happy Days Are Here Again by Barbra Streisand.
I do love that song. Send in the Clowns.
Yeah. And no, I don't listen to consistently the same music if I'm feeling sad. I don't think I can listen to music if I'm feeling sad. It cracks me open too much.
Yes, you like to hold everything inside. So, well, moving on
from that one.
One of the albums that I listened to nonstop, I think when I moved back here with mom and sold the house and I was kind of going through this very transitional phase, I listened to Jane Kramer's album, Valley of the Bones, almost all day long, just over and over and over again. And not only does Jane's voice is just ethereal and beautiful, but her lyrics are just otherworldly, I always say. Like, she just hits a tone and a place that is so magical. And there's something about that specific album. I love all her music. Carnival of Hopes is her other album, which I really, really love. But Valley of the Bones... Which
is funny because you would really hate a real carnival.
I hate carnivals. I was just thinking about that yesterday. Valley of the Bones is this beautiful album. And it's just so real. And so I've known Jane Kramer I've never actually met her in person, but I've known her from EJ, from my friend EJ, for a long time. And I invited Jane to come on the podcast because she had a really interesting experience with her musical career and relationships, and not romantic relationships, but her band relationships. And so we had a really, really awesome conversation. Jane was also on in season 4 of A Fresh Story talking about her miscarriages. So I think that you'll really love this conversation with Jane. She has a lot of just beautiful nuggets in there. So please enjoy this conversation with Jane Kramer, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling fresh start stories. Jane Kramer is a musician, an artist, a soulful siren of words, and I'm so excited that she's here today. I met Jane, it's actually been a long time, but we haven't really chatted in a while. I met her through another one of our podcast guests, who is EJ Henderson, and Jane's music has been my go-to, especially very low times. I feel like whenever I'm depressed, I like turn on her albums and just constantly hyperfixate on them and play them in my ear, and they take me to a whole other level. Jane, you are a lyricist beyond, and your music is it's a treasure. And so we're going to get into it, but you also have so many cool stories. You've done a lot of stuff, and you are somebody that has made a career out of this. And I think that's really, really cool. So we're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and it's been so amazing to watch your journey with Fresh Starts. You guys inspire me so much.
Well, thank you. Well, I joke because my ex-husband was also a big fan of yours. And so we have a poster of yours that's like addressed to both of us. And I kept it. I was like, I'm keeping this. And so I have it. But also Jane, you have beautiful merch too. I'm like obsessed with your t-shirts.
I have Jane Kramer sticker on my laptop. It's actually right here. Yeah, I'll take a picture to show you.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Like right.
I love it. I can't wait.
So you can see, like it's literally right there on the corner.
Yeah,
that makes me really happy.
You have everything you do is done with such intention and beauty, and you're just like, you radiate just such beauty into the world. So we're really looking forward to this.
I've been looking forward to this too. And gosh, where do you want me to start?
Where do you want to start? Like, take us back to the beginning.
I'll take you to the beginning. So, I think for me, I was, excitedly thinking about our conversation lying in bed last night. And I was like, ooh, which fresh start do I want to talk about? But I think honestly, the most poignant for me started right before I turned 30 years old. So for me, that was about almost 14 years ago now. I'm going to turn 44 in January. And 30 is a big, important time in a woman's life anyway, right? And circumstantially, a lot of stuff went down. And basically, at 30, I had a degree in social work and was working as a crisis counselor, outposted in the legal system for a domestic violence agency here in Asheville, North Carolina, where I live. And so I was doing domestic violence crisis counseling in the court system, helping primarily women navigate the legal system. Certainly there were men as well. And which was a very intense job that I loved very passionately. I was also part of a band with two other, at that point, just sister level girlfriends who I had graduated from the same college with. And we were a group called the Barrel House Mamas, and we did 3-part harmonies and kind of Appalachian instrumentation. We were all songwriters, and we were navigating this new kind of terrain of getting some traction as a group and playing some big festivals. And I was married to my college sweetheart. So my ex and I met when I was 19, he was 18. We were little tiny babies, at college, letting loose and discovering ourselves. And he is a musician as well. And so, we were just both on our own independent journeys musically. And that was a big piece of our connection, of course. And so basically, of course, things always have there's a continuum, right? So it's like, I think a lot of relationships don't necessarily just fall apart out of the blue. Sometimes we're keyed into the signs that things might be crumbling. Sometimes we're less keyed in. My relationship with my ex, we both have some depression, some of his depression and mental health issues. He, didn't have as many tools for at the time, and I didn't have as many tools as someone who is, by nature a nurturer and a caregiver. And so I think, it was just sort of the perfect storm for a relationship, especially with two young people, to begin to crumble. And we just were growing into the adults we were meant to be. And so basically, all sort of within the same, year period, even though there had been signs and red flags and things happening. The band that I was in, the gals that I had been, working with and in a deep business relationship with and friendship with, basically kicked me out in a really unceremonious, very painful way. There was sort of the classic story of one of the girls' uncles became a manager for us and was bringing in some outside influences that were really just inappropriate and skeezy men trying to tell us how to dress and just stuff that everything in my core, even though I was just in my 20s and didn't have a lot of the sense I do now, I was like, this is not right. So, that happened. My relationship with my husband was completely falling apart and was, very painful. And I got laid off from my social work domestic violence job that I absolutely loved. And one of my dearest friends, who was like a brother, committed suicide, all,
Wow.
kind of within the same year period, right as I was about to turn 30.
Wow.
And, I think I look back on that time period as, of course, one of the most painful in my entire existence, but also the most powerful and informative. And honestly, my fresh start, as you can maybe imagine, Asheville, where I live and where I was living at the time was an even smaller town then than it is now. And my identity as I knew it as, a social services worker in the community, the wife to another musician, a member of of a cool girl band, all of a sudden, none of those things existed anymore. And I had a very difficult time trying to reinvent myself here and knowing how to still value myself when all of these external things that I thought defined me no longer existed. And so I did a handful of things. And honestly, I don't think of my fresh start really until what I consider my fresh start to be about 4 years later when I moved back to Asheville. But, when that great crumbling happened, I stopped playing music. I thought, I think I allowed, like many of us do, and I think it's an important part of the, just the decay is an important part maybe of the process of before you rebuild. But I stopped playing music because I felt the rejection, from these women that I trusted so deeply. And I jumped into another relationship with someone that was a really inappropriate choice for me, but it was the complete opposite of the person I was with. And therefore it seemed safe. And I, moved across the country to Portland, Oregon, which is a beautiful place. It's also about as far away as I felt like I could get from North Carolina. And I know it took courage to do that, to say, hey, like I'm in a really dark place here, and I need some distance and some geography and some space to, rebuild and look at myself again and get some tools. But I left in a hurry and left kind of with my tail between my legs, feeling like, well, this life that I invested so much in was an epic failure, so it wasn't necessarily a very like calculated and, proud, important, empowering. Yes. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Of course I'm glad I did it, but, so, I think one of the really important things that happened to me in, giving myself the geographical distance that I felt like I needed, was that I then had the quiet and the solitude to be forced to sit with myself. I also started therapy, which to me, and I know you guys have talked about that, and you're such wonderful proponents of, taking care of your mental health, both of you individually and in this podcast, which I so admire and agree with. So I found a great therapist in Portland, and eventually found my way back to songwriting, and realized that if nothing else, that was going to be the thing that saved me.
Thank God you did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because you saved other people.
So,
I mean, it's like a very, Olivia and I always say, like, when you tell your story, you don't know whose roadmap you're making. And it's very like one-to-one. It's very obvious with your music, music is so important, and it becomes people's sort of lifeline so often. My sister, for example, it becomes my sister's lifeline.
Well, I want to go back a little bit. I love all of that. Yeah. So you grew up where?
I grew up outside Philadelphia, and also inside Philadelphia. My parents divorced when I was 16, and my dad moved to the city. So I spent quite a bit of time in the city. But yeah, Philadelphia, up north.
Okay. And was music always part of your life?
It was, yes. I come from a musical family. My grandfather, so my mom's father, was a huge, important influence in my life. He passed away when I was 12, but he was the associate concertmaster and first chair violin of the Philadelphia Orchestra for 52
Wow.
years.
Wow.
So had an incredible career, and, was a first generation American here. His family was all from, Ukraine, Eastern Europe, and Jewish. Yeah, I think we share maybe some similar
We're soul
roots as
sisters,
y'all.
yes.
Family. I love it. I know. We even look like it. Yeah.
I know, we do.
It's so cool. So my grandfather and then my mom was never trained in music, but just has the sweetest voice and the best ear and just this joy and playful love around music. So she was always so encouraging and taught me how to sing harmonies to Bob Dylan at a really young age. And then my dad is a classical guitarist, not professionally, but it's just always been something he's been very devoted to. And he gave me my first guitar as a teenager and said, "Hey, you are wild and have pink hair and are doing drugs and getting in trouble. Why don't you try putting some of your feelings and your angsty poetry into music?" And I am so grateful that he did.
Yeah, we all are. And you also, and I'm bringing this up because this is a sister podcast, but you are a very devoted sister. Carrie is older than you, correct?
Yes, my sister is 5.5 years older than me, and she is such an important, and I love that about you too. She's such an important part of my world and my best friend, and absolutely, I write a lot of songs about her and her kids.
You do, and I was going to say you and Jenny both have we like to call it a VIA, right? Very important aunt. You are very right.
Yes.
I mean, you have beautiful songs about your niece, right, and your nephews, but. And I follow your sister on Instagram because I'm creepy, and I love when she sees your daughter, which we'll get into, and she has claimed Goldie as her own child, which I love.
She really is. Even before I gave birth, she was like my baby. Bring me my baby.
Yeah, I love that. We have a special place for devoted aunts over here. It's okay. Jenny's just weeping. It's okay. We like to cry a lot of this podcast. So you went to college. What did you study in college?
I studied social work and women's studies at Warren Wilson College, which is what brought me to Asheville from Pennsylvania. I think I made it very clear to myself and to my parents at a very young age that I was not going to be, following the path of, for instance, my sister, who did great on her SATs and did great in public school and studied communications and marketing. And, that part of her brain works brilliantly. And she's also very creative and functional. I get the creative part and not the functional part and not the organized part. So, actually my mom tells me that, around 12 years old or so in public school, I was bullied. I was a heavy kid and I was sensitive and artistic, and I didn't yet know that those would be my superpowers. I just thought that they were the things that made me different. And I was being, heavily bullied, and my mom just said I was withering. And she kind of had to advocate with my dad because he's a lot more kind of traditional in some of those ways, and say, we have to do something different for Jane. This is going to crush her spirit. And I'm so glad. So they ended up being able to send me to a Waldorf school. Which for me was just sort of my my chance to nurture that creative artistic part of myself, and to make me realize that I wasn't bad or wrong or for having this artistic sensitive sensibility.
I love that. We talk to a lot of people, not shockingly, on this podcast who have very different souls and spirits. And I think it's such a great reminder. My kids go to a Montessori school, and I know that's what they need, right? It's not like that's just how their soul is not going to be crushed. And I knew that. And I think it's such a great reminder for parents and for everybody, like culturally, not every kid needs a certain type of education. There are kids that online school might be better for them, or public school might be better for them, but to really know your kid is so important. So I love that. So I also can't help but think that there has to be a connection between the Waldorf education and you also are an educator, right? You teach, you teach songwriting, right? And music and all of those things. And I know you're very passionate about lifting new musicians up, right? And really supporting them. So I is there a part of your soul that always felt like you were a little bit of a teacher too?
No, in fact, when you said just now, when you said, I'm like,
I love your answer, because I see that in you though. Like when you're like, I mean, I see your songwriting like workshops and stuff, and I'm like, I'm not even a musician, and I would take that just because like you have such a beautiful.
You should
spirit.
do that. I think you would love that, Olivia.
I know I would.
I think you
someday
would too.
Yeah,
and you're such a beautiful writer, and
thank you.
like,
someday.
I would love for you too.
I would love that, but no. So no, the answer is no.
No, isn't that funny? And I think a big piece of it maybe is just in terms of music. I'm not an educated musician. I am I'm a worldly, learn through absorption by ear musician. And at this point in my career, I've put a few little music theory tools in my toolkit, but nothing. I feel like I'm always around way more esteemed colleagues, and I don't ever consider myself someone that, people could learn musical things from. But at the same time, I guess what I think of is, I think of myself more as a sharer or a lifter.
I love that.
And I feel, and songwriting is, yes, I have this retreat coming up that I'm teaching with my wonderful songwriting friends, Jess Klein and Abigail Dowd, who are both amazing musicians. And we're teaching at the end of October in Mars Hill, North Carolina, which is a beautiful, beautiful place outside Asheville. And, I do, of course, I feel, nervous about it, but I think songwriting at this point in my life, I'm like, okay, I think I can feel
I think
okay
so, Jane. Yes. I would think so. We'll get into that. So you got divorced. You were 30,
I have a
right?
question. I would like to go back.
Yes.
The women in your group, the girl group, the friendships, the bonds.
Yes.
I think that friendship breakups are sometimes so much more painful and traumatizing.
Oh my gosh.
And I think every woman at least has one that they would be like, I was just thinking about texting mine the other day and being like, what happened? So I wonder if you could speak about that. And I don't know, like that experience.
Absolutely.
Or if you have connected with them since, if you've ever gotten a why, I'm curious.
Absolutely. And what you said was so incredibly appropriate. Like, yes, the friendship breakups, the connections with other women, those roots just, there's something about it that can be even more painful than a romantic partnership breakup. I think particularly with this one, it was painful because it was very deceitful from people who I had been, sleeping in hotel beds with across the country and, sharing we shared our most vulnerable, pieces of our hearts through our songwriting. And we grew up together, in so many ways. It was through this outside influence that to me just seemed so incredibly not to the core of what our values were as friends and as a musical entity. So it was like a gut punch, and I am still working through it, and I can't tell you how many just dreams and all kinds of just my psyche continually trying to process it, digest it, make it okay. One of the girls in the group, there was always a little more friction with. There was always a little more, we had some stuff. I think she had some elements of my character that felt threatening to her. And she was just kind of gone. She was just kind of like, I'm out and I have nothing to apologize for, and that's it. And so that, for me, that friendship was it was a death that I grieved, and it was gone, The other woman in the group was, incredibly remorseful and worked hard to at least express, that she was sorry and that she, was aware of how, she took some accountability, and that was, that helped a little bit, but, it's been 13 or so years. And, we've had an awkward coffee. I've, a time or two over the years. But, the repair wasn't significant enough to, and they continued on as their own group. And did some very hurtful things, like took me out of the YouTube videos, or didn't give me, things like that were just. One thing I did do for myself from that, though, was in the liquidating of our band account, we were like 2 weeks from recording our second album when they pulled the rug out. And so there was money in the account. I didn't get a chance to be part of how we liquidated it. I just got a certified mail check, but I took that money and I went to Italy. And that was also when I was, separating, thank you, from my husband. And so I went to Italy and I pray loved. And that was a nice kind of step in just being alone for the first time and feeling that aloneness, and, just trying to allow myself to experience some pleasure and some joy again. Yeah.
It's interesting. I can't help but think that they were incredibly jealous of you, I would assume, right? I mean, Jenny and I talk a lot. So Jenny's married to a musician now as well. And I was married, as you know, to a musician, and they're very different types of musicians in that one comes from the soul and one comes from a lot of
the hands.
Right?
I mean, I think
automatoning, right? And so you are the type of musician that which is why I think it's hard for you to think of yourself as a teacher, is because you can't replicate what you do. Right? It comes from so deep in your soul and from an ethereal place that is you can't speak about it. Right. And that's why your music touches people in the way that it does. When you're in a group with somebody like you want them out, right? You don't want that person in.
I mean, if you're insecure, right? If you've got any insecurities,
right? If you're insecure. And I think that it doesn't, as you're talking, and I knew a little bit about this, but I didn't know the whole story. But of course they don't want you there because you're the shining star, right? And all you do is make them look like they can't shine as bright, right? And so I think it's very threatening. And I think that we see this all the time in women's friends groups, right? We see it in business groups. We see it in business. We see co-founders. Jenny and I see co-founders fall apart constantly, right? And so I think it's for your own, narrative to remember that it's not anything that you didn't do. It's just that this is something of who you are that was so threatening to their existence as a musician. And that often comes from musicians who are not fully soulfully meant to be a musician on this planet. And, and I think that's why you connect so beautifully with other musicians who are of your vibe, right? Because you see each other in that way. So, I think
my gosh.
I mean, I think, and that, I don't know, there's no other story there to tell. That's kind of the bottom line. They don't want you around. Why, why actors don't want the best actor who can actually act on stage with them, right? So I think that there's just a big piece of that there. I mean, you clearly are destined for greatness, right? Your music is destined for greatness. You are, and you can hear it. And there's an intentionality in your music in every single note and way you strum your guitar and the way that your voice, shrills and tings and all that exactly how it's going to touch the human soul. And that's beyond musician, right? That's some sort of spiritual creature. So where you go is going to it's going to shake people. It's going to rattle people a little bit, so just keep that in mind. As you step into your greatness, it's because you really are just that great, and I think that that's just something to remember. And I've known you for a while but you can hear it through your music. It's not shocking to me. So just, keeping that little message in mind. But
gosh, I am tucking that in here.
Good. You should.
I can't tell you.
I will tell you
any day of the week too. Yeah.
I will tell you all the time. But I want to get into a really much more important topic. Was you're obsessed with your husband, your current husband. Jason is adorable. So between 30 and you put your boots on, as you saying, right? You put your boots on and you met Jason. So how did that come to be?
Yes, and this is a cool story. So Jason is well, he's 15 years older than I am. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that. And age is so relative. He like has more energy, and we have a 2-year-old and he just turned 58, which is
He
amazing.
does not look
Um
58.
he does not. He's got some good genes. I know. Thank you. I agree. But so Jason, lived around here. He went away professionally for a while, but he is a journalist. He's a writer. He had his own fresh start, and I won't tell that story. But he, worked for the city newspaper for many, many years, and was just very abruptly in the corporate buyout, like is happening with newspapers all over the
Mm-hmm.
country. He was very, abruptly laid off, and it was, a really difficult time for him. But what he was able to do was take his love of this town, Asheville, and his love of reporting, and to make that his life raft and his new career. So it started as like a blog website called ashvegas.com.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's actually a Substack e-newsletter. And it's, he lifts up the brand new, art galleries and the restaurants.
I follow it, and I'm not even in Asheville, so it's fun
so
to just
sweet.
see. Yeah.
Thank you. So he, was always around town reporting on music. He was a fan of the Barrel House Mamas, my band. We laugh about so there's some like creeper pictures of me like performing from before we really knew each other and stuff on his old website. And but yeah, so he, I knew of him just very peripherally. And I knew that his website was an important voice in this town that broke my heart. This town, the first time broke my heart. And when I knew I had to leave, I had written a song, and I didn't, I wasn't doing a ton of songwriting then, but I wrote a song just sort of about, I guess it was just my voice wanting to come out. And I feel like a lot of my songs, and maybe in other musicians or artists you've spoken with or interviewed, or even in your own writing, sometimes I will speak what my, what my life, what am I trying to say? What advice my life needs to follow. It's like this deep inner, more confident knowing than this self will come out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it will forecast what's going to happen in my life. Sometimes it'll be like, well, this is what you really need to be doing, girl. Sometimes. So it was a song, that kind of just spoke to that. And, I felt called to share it with Ash Vegas. So I didn't really know him, but I emailed him. And this was back in probably like 2011 or something. And I just said, hey, I'm leaving town. Some really horrible personal things have collapsed and I'm out, but would you want to share this song? And he wrote back and just said, oh my gosh, Jane, like, I hope you know what an important part of the musical story of Asheville you've been, and we'll be sad to miss you. And of course, I'm going to share this song. And it was very sweet, and I felt like this tender connection with him, even though I didn't know him. And so, yeah, I did. I went my separate way. I moved out to Portland. I wanted nothing to do with music. I sat on the computer and looked at how these two girls that broke my heart were excelling with their music, and had to do some self-care unfollowing, which I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
We all have to do that sometimes. But I ended up going on to record my first solo album out in Portland. And one thing I will say, when you were giving me your beautiful, beautiful, just complete lovely affirmation about my music, I do honestly, looking back, it sounds contrived, but I don't mean it to be. I do have gratitude to those girls for kicking me the hell out, because I don't think I ever would have become the songwriter or the performer that I am, because I knew that my space in that group, I could only take up a very small certain amount.
Yeah.
And we didn't do a whole lot of my songs because they wanted to do theirs. And so I didn't have to know how to be a solo performer and carry a room with just me and my guitar. And, anyway, so I think when I finally was able to step into that space and say, hey, it's just me, and I can, let go of this thing that has saved my life and showed me it's saved my life over and over and over again. And, might help save other people's lives too, if they're in as dark a night of their soul as I've been. I can let it go, or I can just just freaking do it. And so yeah, I wrote my first solo album. I recorded it. I realized I didn't have a ton of friends in Portland. I had a few.
I'm just looking at Spotify and your album. That's why I'm looking at my phone, because I want to pull up
Oh
certain song
yes,
titles. Because now we're gonna
got a rainbow coming in on you, Lulu.
I know. I keep having it all week on my neck. One of our experts said it was. I have things to say. It's my throat chakra. It's happened all week to me.
I believe it.
Okay, so Carnival of Break and Bloom. That's your first. That was the first album.
That was the first one, yes, that I recorded in Portland, and I decided that I wasn't ready to move back to Asheville, but I wanted to come back to release the album, hoping that I could just have a little taste of some kind of restoration after leaving, and feeling a little bit of shaky courage, like, hey, I left, but I'm still here. I'm writing songs again. Here's me, performing in this braver, different capacity. And when I came back on a visit to do the album release show and release the album, I thought, well, I need publicity, and if I want anybody to know, then I gotta meet with Ash Vegas. And so we had just we had a coffee, and I felt this instant, incredible, just kindred connection, and I didn't even know what it was, and I didn't know if he was married or I didn't know, but I felt a deep important connection. I was so hoping he'd come to the release show. He didn't come, which I found out later he did have a good excuse for, but but I just it was one of those conversations where obviously I felt safe enough to just get real and tell him the real stuff. And he was engaged and asked really thoughtful questions, and
he's a
did
journalist.
A beautiful write-up, because he's a journalist. There's that. But that experience, and we went our separate ways for 2 or 3 more years. Wow. And I recorded
the real When Harry Met Sally thing going on here.
Yes. And then so when a few more years passed, I went back to Portland, started feeling like it's time to move back to my mountains. Like I don't get to kick myself out of this town. It's not finished with me yet. And the more healing I did, the more therapy I did, the more deeply I dug into or stepped into the empowerment of my own songwriting. I realized, that Portland's a beautiful place, but I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be back in Asheville and to claim my place there, and to not give up on the, however many 12, 13 years I had already spent investing in a community there, and making a musical place for myself there. So I went back to record my Carnival of Hopes album, and worked with a lovely group of Asheville musicians, some of which I hadn't met yet. I just hired them for the album, and then they kind of later became my band. Anyway, I ended up moving back to Asheville in the summer of 2015, and lived on my own for the first time in my entire adult life. I had always lived with, someone I was dating or my ex-husband, and had my first, big girl apartment in the top floor of this beautiful old house. And it was such an important time and a special time. And I just felt very pulled to see what Jason was doing. And I didn't, I can't even explain it. Like I looked at him, and of course I was like, oh, I'm attracted to you, but I couldn't even name that. It was just this inexplicable pull to this person. And so I reached out to him, and I just said, hey, I'm living in town again. Would you like to get together? And he was like, hell yeah, I would, Jane Kramer. And we met, and the rest was history. So yeah.
What this is not about Jason. This is about Asheville. Like,
that's okay.
What is it about Asheville? Is it the town? Like, what draws you back? I mean, it's amazing that you would go back there, because that's not where your family is.
It's not where my family is. No. And, I don't know if you all feel this way about certain places or a place, but it just feels like my dirt. There is just this inexplicable, like, connection I feel. I think some of it is, of course, like the town, which is obvious. It's changed a whole lot here and grown a whole lot, for better and worse over the last few years. But it's the mountains. It's just something, natural and spiritual about the natural beauty of this place. And I think it's also, the music and the heritage of these mountains, although it's not exactly the one I grew up with. I found my musical identity here, both because of the music of Appalachia and just because of, the natural, magical, mystical juju of this place. And so I can't always even name it, but it's home. It's home way more than Pennsylvania ever was.
It vibes with you.
And it vibes with me. Yeah. And I was determined to vibe with it. It just took me a minute.
I'm looking at your album. So do you have a question, Jenny? No. Oh, see, your music started playing. You have a beautiful song. I want to close out the Jason story before you move into more.
Oh yeah.
The song "Wedding Vows," right, which is from Valley of the Bones, is I send to everybody getting married because it's like my favorite song. Jenny's gonna start crying again, and it's. I would love for you just to tell us, like, what is it about Jason? Like, what makes him that special person that you're so excited to spend the rest of your life with?
Oh, I love that question. I think it's a lot of things. I think he has the words. He has the most compassionate, just inquisitive soul of anyone I've ever met. And he has the words to express that, which up until him, I hadn't been with anyone that had that level of emotional intelligence and spiritual generosity. And from the very beginning, he pushed me. On our very first date, he said, I had sent him, we had like a little bit of email, it's like, get to my heart through your sexy words. And so I didn't actually mean sexy words. I just meant I find words
sexy.
I mean,
words are sexy. Yes.
Yeah. But I had sent him my album because Carnival of Hopes I was getting ready to release it. And, that's a big way to get to know me, right? Listen to my music. And, he sent some really just beautiful, thoughtful, responses to songs and shared, some vulnerable experiences of his own that the songs evoked. But on our very first date, he said, okay, Jane, Carnival of Hopes, why are we calling it this? Or he didn't say we, but he said, why are you calling, where is that album title from? And can you, being a journalist, totally, like, can you express to me what this album means to you or something? It was a big question. And I realized that I didn't have that answer yet. Of course, it was like, nebulously and, spiritually there in the songs. But I thought, I realized at first I felt very on the spot, very flustered and embarrassed. But then I left the date and I wrote it in an email and I sent it to him. And it made me realize, gosh, like, no one's asked me that. Like, what a blessing to have someone in my life. And he continues to do that, with my career and to help me, remember to value myself. And, the relationship I had been in before him, which lasted several years was also with someone very insecure who felt very threatened about me performing, talking to other people, you name it. It was, I still can't totally believe I found myself in a relationship that was that, oppressive, but it happens.
None of us can, but yeah.
None of us can. And it happens. And we learn and hopefully we grow and we value ourselves more moving forward. But, he, has just, the part of me that needs to be a little bit wild and write songs and explore, everything, and talk about the hard stuff. He not only isn't afraid of, he cherishes and then does the beautiful nudging to get me to go further and deeper into it and gives me the space to do it. And that to me is everything I could have ever wanted in a partner, and I hope that I do the same for him. I think him having something he's so passionate about as well, is huge,
Yeah.
So
now, having just done this myself and I write poetry, Thomas writes music and plays and poetry. How hard was it for you to write your actual wedding vows? Because it was very, very difficult for me to
yes.
I couldn't go on forever. How hard was it for you?
Totally. Oh my gosh, it was so hard. And I don't know about you, but I am a last minuter. I am like, let's get this done at 4:00 in the morning,
That's
when
my
I'm supposed to be
husband.
Is it? Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
He kept
It's so
telling
funny.
me he's like an actor too, and so he was like, I'm just gonna wing it, and he was saying that to me because he knew that he wasn't gonna wing it. But I was like, listen, man, I was a wedding officiant for 10 years. Like, you're not gonna be able to wing it when you're up there. I'm telling you, it's not gonna work. And so he wrote them like the day before, and then he was trying to go off book really desperately. He was trying to memorize them, and I was like, it's not gonna work. And then when we were up there, he was like, I'm glad I wrote this down. I was like, see, I told you. But yeah, no, that's
adorable.
him. Yeah,
I love that.
I
so
started
much.
weeks out. I was like, I have to, because I knew it would be so hard to, and then I made Olivia read them.
Distill it all. Yes.
Distill it. Yeah.
Totally.
And
yes.
Right. And I wanted to distill it. I wanted it to be, show, not tell. Like we always want to do when we're doing good writing.
No, absolutely. And by the way, I bet you were a wonderful wedding officiant. And Olivia, I bet you'd be a wonderful wedding officiant too. I have officiated a few weddings in my day as well, but not at the level you have.
She would be. I officiated Olivia's wedding, so I think we decided quickly she would not officiate mine because it didn't, it didn't stick.
Got it.
So
I totally get that.
So did you, if I remember correctly, did you sing that song at your wedding, Jane?
I did, as my wedding vows. And honestly, for me, I think because distilling it was going to be so hard, I was like, well, then I'll have to just confine myself to the form of a song.
Yeah.
But I was so, all the songs I write feel, important to me, or like I put a lot of pressure on myself to get them right and to say the thing just right. But this song felt extra important. And so I was literally like, we had a wonderful small, wedding at our friend's farm. And I was so glad that I was able to be present. I wasn't the first time around. The first wedding for me in my 20s, I didn't have a very good time. And there's a lot that can be read into that, right? But if you get the chance to do it over and it's, and it feels good, then that's great. And I had a great time the second time, but I was very consumed with the darn song and getting it right up until the last moment. And I did play it.
How did you not sob through the whole thing? I was sobbing through my vows. It was just the two of us, and I was like, could not keep it together. I was just looking at the lyrics of the song, and I started crying.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's beautiful. I think my crier, and I am a crier too, but my crier turns off when I'm nervous.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Shuts off. So I'm just like, and maybe that's just like a survival thing too, so that I can perform. But of course, the second it was all done, or I think the morning after our wedding, when I was just so incredibly moved by, the friends and the family and the beauty of it all and the way everyone pitched in, that's when I ugly cried for 2 hours. But getting through the song felt okay. Although I did definitely tear up. I think when I finished the song, and we had everyone kind of stand around us in a circle at this pond, it was very hippie and very sweet, very us. And, the song, I hadn't even finished it yet. And I guess my thing was I'll keep writing this as we keep being us, and eventually I did want to record it. So I did finish it. I hadn't written the second verse yet. I don't think I love the little boy in you. He makes a patient model airplane verse. I don't think I had finished that yet, but I did have the chorus and the first verse and stuff. But, I think when I finished, people were like, "Oh, she wrote a song. What's he gonna do?" And his vows were I would say I thought more beautiful than the song.
Because he's a writer too.
And because he's a writer too, and he used some lines from my songs in his vows. And this is one other thing I'll tell you guys about our wedding, which was really sweet, was my dad, who in my younger life I had a more complicated relationship with. He wasn't around a whole lot, but in our in my adult life we've worked very hard to just focus on the wonderful things we share.
As many daughters of divorced families do.
Yes, of course. And he and I are very similar in a lot of ways. And the guitar has been such a beautiful, important thread. And one of my very favorite things to do is to have him play, because he's a better guitar player than I am, and to sing. And so we've done some songs together over the years and stuff. And that's my favorite. I love it. But he is always giving me a hard time about writing sad songs, right? What did I ever do so wrong? Is this all you processing all the blah, blah, whatever? But he took one of my songs. It's actually a song called Georgia that that is on my first album, which, you know, kind of hints at like my life fell apart. I can't be anybody's wife. This sucks, whatever. He took that song and he changed the lyrics in his wedding toast, just about, you know, being a good woman and being, you know, all this really beautiful stuff that just, it was incredibly meaningful to me. And it was, to me, just a very sweet full circle moment, like all these sad songs and now here we are. And, you know, it wasn't also like, oh, I had to find another partner to be whole again. I think that is a big piece of why, of course, like, you know, why it does work with Jason, because I was whole and I was happy, you know, and I had things to bring to the table, and I knew what I needed my partner to bring to the table. And yeah.
I want to talk about a few songs. I'm like, I would love to, I'm going to just like get you on to talk about every single one of your songs, because your lyrics are like, I mean, seriously, I want to just read. So we're going to transition a little bit. You have a song called Child, which is from your record, your album, Valley of the Bones.
I like going on a record.
Yeah. And I want to just read these lyrics, and I want to talk about where this song came from, because this is a big part of Valley of the Bones. So Valley of the Bones came out in 2019. I personally, to put it in context of my life, was grieving. Our grandmother passed away in 2017, who was like my person, and then my marriage fell apart. And so I was going through a lot of grief. And so you have a line in this song which is like, in my heart, I tried going to the ocean. Right? She wrote in foam what I already know. Being human is dancing on a nickel's edge, with equal measures, holding on and letting go. And so it's Tuesday, so I'm standing in the grocery checkout line, and life continues like it used to across the highway. The school kids kick a red ball at the sky. Every time I listen to that lyric, it's like she fucking gets it. Like life moves on, and you are standing there screaming inside. So where did Child come from? And also Valley of the Bones, the song, which you sing, I lost a child back in February, right? And it brought me to my knees. We had a friend recently who lost a child in February, and I sent them that song, and I was like, you absolutely have to listen to this. But the lyrics to Valley of the Bones are, I mean, where did this come from, right? So obviously to write these songs about grief and loss, you have had to have gone through some sort of big loss. So where did that come from?
Yes. So I, you know, in my heart, always wanted to be a mother, and, you know, wasn't exactly sure how. And there were times when it seemed just impossible. You know, I was 35 when I, you know, broke up with the ex that one of my many exes,
mid guy,
was, you know, just was totally inappropriate for me. It was toxic, and you know, was starting all over, I just wasn't sure exactly how I was going to get to do that. And there were times when it didn't seem like I might, but Jason and I fell in love, and I got pregnant about a year and a half into us being together, and was, you know, like, oh my gosh, it's happening. This is so exciting. And I ended up miscarrying. It was incredibly, obviously, just it was spiritually crushing. And it was, you know, I think one thing that also didn't help was that I had some, you know, just bad Western medicine doctors that were just like, well, what do you expect? You're almost 37. Like, you know, they weren't very, you know, solution oriented or sensitive. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, I struggle as a human person. I struggle with depression anyway. And it's, you know, it's just a part of myself that I've learned to be very compassionate towards. But I've been on, you know, medication for depression pretty much all of my adult life. And it's one tool in my toolbox that helps me. But, you know, I think along with the hormones of pregnancy and miscarriage, and then just the incredible emotional, spiritual loss, and then the isolation, the part where, you know, if it's early in a pregnancy, you may not be telling people. And this this entire universe just took place inside your body. And you're at the freaking like stop and go standing in line with the loud neon whatever, and people are buying their Pepsis, and you're like, but do you know that I am dying inside?
Yeah.
Grief is like that. Like you said, it just screams regardless of, the world just spinning on. And it was just something that I didn't yet have a language for. And the Valley of the Bones song, I'm trying to think which one. I want to say I almost worked on Valley of the Bones and Child concurrently. Valley of the Bones that song took a lot longer to finish. I think it took me like 4 years or something to finish and I had lots of different iterations of it. But I mentioned at the beginning of our talk that I had a dear friend that committed suicide, and when I was around turning 30 years old, and he would have been about just a year older than I was. But he was a really important part of my life, and an irreverent, beautiful, poet, artist. And I had a dream that, he visited me. I actually get to dream about him a lot, which is really special and makes me feel like he's still with me. And I know he is, just like your grandmother's with you, right? But we were sitting on the porch together in my dream and just having this conversation. And it was weird because I knew he was physically sitting next to me, but I also knew that he was not of this plane any longer. And he was just sharing some beautiful insight about just sort of the transience of this human experience, and how the things we put so much meaning in, maybe aren't as important as we think they are, and we're also not as alone as we think we are. And that dream conversation just really stuck with me and was sort of the first stepping stone in me moving forward from my grief over this loss. And so I think that dream and that conversation, and giving it the gravity and the weight to just be like, okay, this is important enough to write about and to share, because I know that there are so many other people going through this that maybe need an outlet for their grief, or to open the conversation to be able to speak about it.
So how did you get to Goldie, your daughter? How did she come to be?
Yeah. So let's see. I had so it's interesting. I had 2 February miscarriages. I had another miscarriage a few years later, also in February, right as the world was shutting down for the pandemic. Wow. And at that point I was 40, and also I've had some crummy doctors. And so I also had a doctor that, was just very unhelpful, very apathetic, and very biased about my age. But something really deep inside me knew, like, no, I really do think that I can do this. I do think I can get pregnant. I do think I can have a baby. And everyone's journey is different. And I have so much compassion for people who, despite their best efforts and their deepest desires, can't conceive naturally or bring a pregnancy to term. That's so common. And I still don't know why I was blessed to be able to do this, but the world was shutting down. My doctor said, I don't know what you want to hear from me. You're 40, your eggs are 40. You could try a fertility clinic, but they won't even work with you with your own embryo, So the pandemic wasn't exactly a time to like go visit new doctors' offices and stuff. So I felt deeply broken. I had already written Valley of the Bones and Child. I was like, great, I already wrote the freaking songs, and I guess I can use them to console myself, or I can learn from my own wisdom. But all I want to do is write another song about it, and I'm not even going to be able to write a better song. So now I feel like crap, and I can't even write another good song because I already wrote it or whatever.
They are amazing songs.
That's your expression. I mean, that's the way you process. It's hard when you've already written the song. You don't want to have to live it again.
I mean, I just want to, the lyric, my bed is full of shouting ghosts. Woof, Jane. Like that is not a human lyric. That is something that comes from another world.
Thank you. It felt like that. I'm sure we've all felt like we've had beds full of shouting ghosts for various reasons. But so I think I put down trying to get pregnant again for another year. And Jason, of course, was incredibly supportive, and the losses affected him too. And, but he never, put any pressure. And I think, Jason is significantly older than I am. So he was like, if this happens, amazing. We met when he was 50. So, or we, started dating when he was 50. So he was like, I didn't know if this was going to be in the cards for me, and what a huge gift that it is. So, we decided to try again. And it worked. And, I think pregnancy after loss is another really important conversation to have, in an area where people absolutely need support, because you can't relax. You're worried the whole time, and you can taste the ache of the loss that you've had, and it's scary and it's hard. And this time I was lucky enough to stumble into the right kind of OBGYN care that was really inclusive and really lovely, and midwives, and said, you being pregnant after 40 is something to celebrate. Yes, there are some risks, but and I felt also very blessed to be able to have access to good health care, and to have a healthy pregnancy. And so we were blessed with our little Goldie girl. And the postpartum period really knocked me on my ass, which is also complicated when you're like, I wanted this so bad, and now I am, but I got through it. And again, I think writing was a huge tool of survival for me, and a way to connect with other people who had gone through the same thing.
Yeah. And she is a spitting image of your husband. So adorable. She's so cute. And such a little personality, you can see from the pictures.
She is. Yes.
Well, we are happy she's here. So
thank you.
If somebody's going through a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you could give them?
I think something that I wish I had known was, or had said to myself, was, it's okay to let it hurt like hell, and you're going to make something really beautiful of this. You're going to turn this into something that's more beautiful than you could even imagine. And I think also, just, not being afraid to ask for help, to say, I'm in it. I'm in a really dark place, to find your people, and to help, let them help hold you up,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And our last question, the hardest one, but you're in Asheville, which is like a huge center of food, right? So
yes.
What was the last thing that you ate and truly loved?
Yes, I like this question. And there is tons of great food here. But this morning I went to this precious bakery that my husband told me about, and I hadn't been there yet, with my daughter. It's called the Rabbit Hole. And it's like surrounded by this beautiful community garden. Goldie loved it. She was running all around. But we had, and it was her first almond croissant. I am such a fan of pastries, and like a good almond croissant with that like gooey filling and the powdered sugar on top. It was like perfectly flaky, and oh my gosh. And it was so fun to watch my daughter experience her very first one. She was like, what is this magic? So that was the most recent wonderful thing I ate.
Love that. Isn't that always like that's the part of parenting I feel like nobody talks about? It's like not the big milestones. It's like those stupid little, like, I remember like even like the first time we listened to certain songs together with my kids and stuff, and it's like watching their eyes, light up when Ray Charles plays, and it's like, that's like those moments you bank, right? You just go back to when your kid is screaming at you at 3:00 in the morning, you remember those moments. So
yes.
Well,
the almond
Jane,
croissant thing is very important. I have some very important memories associated with almond croissants, so I get
it. Really, I didn't even know you liked almond croissants.
Dad and I once went to Chelsea Market and shared one. Thomas and I went to like the Meadows here and shared one, and I was like, I'm sitting in a field with my partner and we're eating croissants for no reason, which was very special to me.
That's so special. That is beautiful. Yes, I love it.
I learned something new about you too. Jane, you are such a delight. And please, I want everybody to go listen to her music. Like, I have it on repeat all the time. I can't express to people how important your lyrics are especially for people who are grieving, whatever the grief is, and for hope, right? All your music is about hope. It's about love. It's about sisters and relationships and parents. And I'm so grateful that you are in our life and that, you are a celebrity to us. And I can't wait to see what you do next and where you go with your boots and your guitar and your husband and daughter. And it's just so exciting to see. So we're super proud of you, and your music is changing the world. And I hope that you know that.
Well, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much that means. And I am huge fans of both of yours. And I'm so happy to meet you now, Genevieve. And you're stuck with me, whether you like it or not. Olivia,
like it. Because you guys got the little sister with big powerful sister energy. So,
And what y'all are doing is changing the world too. And my goodness, if this had only been around when I was making one of my fresh starts, but I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing now. It is so important. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here, and we're so proud of you. A Fresh Story is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at afreshstory.com.